Well, hello and welcome to the stream. Let's go ahead and see what we can get into. We're going to do a little bill from Midnight in the Desert. And this is going to be Flying Humanoids that went out on November 30th, 2015.
Desert and a great American Southwest. I you all good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be in the world's 25 time zones. Each and every one covered like a blanket by this program, Midnight in the Desert. My name is Eric Bell. The rules of our program are so simple. Okay, English, and around from show. One thing interesting note tonight, we're talking about flying cryptids. You don't know what that means, stay tuned. We'll throw you in. Our president is at Planet Talk in France, trying to keep along with the rest of the world, the world from getting too hot to handle, which would mean 3 degrees Celsius. 3 degrees. Can you imagine 3 degrees Celsius? You have water everywhere. I've got to tell you, what is going on in France, I hope, is mostly about what's going on in Syria. The situation in Syria is really scaring the hell out of me, and should scare you too. And I hope that's what they're actually talking about. Even though climate warming is certainly important, having people to worry for is also important. And the Russians have now installed this incredible new missile battery. These missiles are capable of flying at Mach 5, hitting something at Mach 5. They are missiles that disperse other missiles. Very, very high tech. As they were probably better than what we have. Now, as you know, Turkey, a NATO member, has shot down a Russian jet. They are not going to apologize for it, and because of that, borders close, gas gets turned off to parts of Turkey, and all kinds of terrible things are happening between the Russians and the Turks. And that's bad enough, but I'm telling you, with a mix, it's the devil's mix in Syria. And what we have in Syria right now, in my opinion, is a soup that could end up cooking to a boil and becoming World War III. I know that's scary, but I'm going to tell you, I'm keeping my eye on it. And the fact that Turkey shot down a Russian plane, bad. Not yet World War III, right? But keep in mind, those of you who haven't been around for a long time, we have a treaty with Turkey. And if Turkey were to really begin mixing it up with the Russians, we have an obligation, a duty, a treaty-bound duty to come to Turkey's, come help them, right? So if it really gets bad, here's what you should watch for. If you hear of other warplanes getting shot down, if you hear of a U.S. jet getting shot down by the Russians, and they haven't put those things there for nothing. I mean, there are French planes flying and bombing, Russian planes flying and bombing, U.S. planes flying and bombing. There's bombing going all over the place, going on all over the place over there. So if you begin to see awful things happen, like a U.S. plane getting shot down, or a couple of U.S. planes, or a U.S. plane and a Russian plane getting into a fight, or Turkey shooting down more Russian planes, or an assault of some kind on Turkey, or perhaps somebody's asset at sea is plundered. If you see something like that begin to happen, take notice, because that would be the opening salvo of World War III. If that happened, I would pack my family up and be off to Southeast Asia as quickly as I could. Not that I think that would help much, in the case of World War III, I'm supposing that nobody much cares about Southeast Asia. So all I might succeed in doing is, having a slow, painful death due to radiation. But I'm trying to drive home to you how dangerous what's going on in Syria is right now. To you. I understand this treaty, the NATO treaty. We have no choice. If Russia were to attack Turkey in some meaningful way, we would have no choice. And how quickly could that escalate? You know, the people that have studied the possibility of thermonuclear war think pretty quickly. So I'll leave it at that. Shoppers did a lot more on Cyber Monday than they did on, Black Friday? People are starting to stay home and do their buying on the keyboard. And I wonder what that's going to do to shopping centers, you know? I mean, it's just too easy. You can shop, you can click, you can compare, you can get the cheapest price, you can generally get free shipping, maybe no tax, who knows? It's quite a deal. Eventually, we're all going to just stay home. Now, I told you this story would make the bigger news, and it has. Fox News reports that astronomers in Australia have picked up an alien radio signal, notice how I emphasized alien, from space for the first time as it occurred. The signal or radio burst was discovered on May 15, 2014. It was being reported by the monthly notice of the Royal Astronomical Society. The burst identified within 10 seconds of its occurrence, said Emily Petroff, a doctoral student from Melbourne's Swinburne University of Technology. The importance of the discovery was recognized very quickly, and we're all working very excitedly to contact other astronomers and telescopes around the world to look at the location of the burst. Now, to give you some idea of the strength of the burst, it released in a few milliseconds as much power as our sun does in 24 hours. The first one actually was discovered back in 2007, but always after the fact. Now they're hearing it real time. One of them was a double burst. So, could be aliens? Yes. I wouldn't get really excited about it, according to Petrov at this point, but they think it could also be coming from natural sources. So we have now had two things to get pretty excited about, more so than at any time that I've done broadcasting. And that goes back, as you know, a very, very long way. So between the megastructures, which, by the way, despite NASA's attempt at talking about a comet storm, which is a possibility, still remain every bit as much a mystery as the day they were announced as now these radio signals. So we have now had two instances of possible alien contact, or I guess I should say recognizing the fact that they are there in a month. And I went decades waiting for something like that. All right, coming up in a moment, Ken Gerhard is a widely recognized cryptozoologist. He's a field investigator from Center for Foreign Zoology, a fellow of the Angea Institute, and consultant for several anomalous research organizations. He has traveled the world searching for evidence of legendary beasts, including Bigfoot. I almost heard a cheer go up. The Loch Ness Monster, the Chupacabra, enigmatic winged creatures, and werewolves. In addition to co-hosting the History Channel TV series Missing in Alaska, it's an interesting one. We will ask about that. Ken has appeared in Monster Quest, featured in the History Channel special The Real Wolfman, as well as Legend Hunters, Unexplained Files, Paranormal, Weird or What? Ancient aliens, monsters, and mysteries in America, ultimate encounters, true supernatural, and the Monster Project. Born on Friday the 13th of October, what a day. Ken has traveled to 26 different countries on 6 continents, as well as virtually all of the U.S. An avid adventurer, he has camped along the Amazon, explored the Galapagos, like the Australian outback, and has visited many ancient and mysterious sites from Machu Picchu to Stonehenge. Here, in just a moment, will come Ken, and he's going to talk about cryptids. Very, very interesting cryptids. So stay right where you are. How do you feel about monsters, huh? Tonight we will bring you monsters galore. Take a seat, grab a cup of coffee, whatever your choice, and get ready because here it goes. Gerhard. Okay, good, good. Welcome to Midnight in the Ghost.
Well, thank you, Art. And please allow me to say that it's definitely an honor and a pleasure to be here speaking with you this evening.
Exactly. So you're here to talk mainly, I guess, about cryptids, right? Flying cryptids for the most part.
Yeah, that's been kind of a focus of my research through the years. You know, the field of cryptozoology is vast and it's expanding, evolving. It's a movement that's been around for a while and it encompasses a lot of really strange, bizarre, and unknown creatures. But I found that the flying cryptids are often neglected by researchers and investigators, my colleagues. So I've kind of been on that particular trail for a number of years now. And I've got to tell you, I have accumulated a surprising number of accounts from very credible people who have seen flying creatures that are not recognized by science.
Mm-hmm.
And a number of forms.
When we advertised this, we said flying humans. Now, I guess it's a little, is that a little misleading, or because these things, is that misleading?
Well, here's the conundrum, because a flying humanoid, and keep in mind that the field of cryptozoology was a movement that was started by actual zoologists, so it's based on hard science, the fossil history, and so forth. So the notion of a flying humanoid, it doesn't really fit squarely in there, you know what I mean? So but we do investigate these things as cryptid researchers because somebody has to. And, you know, as I mentioned, there are literally hundreds of documented sightings of these flying humanoid beings. And I imagine that it goes only scratching the surface.
Well, there you go, flying humanoid. You just said it. So humanoid-like, not exactly totally humans, but humanoid-like or partly human. And a good example would be, before the show, I had to have a look up, because I didn't want to spring it on Aswang, A-S-W-A-N-G. My wife, as you know, is Filipina, and she is from the southern island of the Philippines, where everybody believes in the Aswang. And if you guys out there in the audience go to Google and you put in Aswang, A-S-W-A-N-G, and then click on images on the wall, you can kind of scroll down and you can see all these different photographs as Ken did prior to the show. And an awful lot of them, to me, look like what we're talking about tonight. Now, when I tell you my wife believes in the ocelot, I'm not kidding. I mean, she is scared to death of this creature, and when you see it, you'll understand why. So, Ken, when you see the photographs that depict the ocelot, what do you make of it?
Well, the ocelot is actually, it reminds me of similar creatures that are reported in other diverse cultures around the world. For example, on the African island of Pemba, there's something known as the papabawa, which is basically a vampire-like creature, not human, nobody really knows, but it flies in the dark of night and attacks and kills and eviscerates, and people on the island are very terrified of the papabawa to the extent that in the 1990s there was actually a case of mass hysteria on that particular island. So, of course, in Mexico, very close to our island, we have the chupacabra. And people take it very, very, very seriously south of the border.
I don't know where you are. You're not in Mexico, right?
I'm in San Antonio, Texas.
San Antonio, close. Okay. Mm-hmm. I went to basic in San Antonio, so I know exactly where you are.
Absolutely. So, again, the kind of the interesting thing about this, taking a global perspective and look at these flying humanoid creatures is there are many similarities in different cultures around the world. The fear is very real, as you indicated. The descriptions do vary, and that is the really interesting part.
Well, in the case of the ocelot, unfortunately, what it does is find young, newly pregnant women, and it takes the fetus from them. It's pretty horrible, pretty horrible. And my wife believes that she heard one on her roof, trying really, really hard to get in. And it is, I believe, unique to the Philippines. But as you mentioned, each culture seems to have their own, no matter where you go around the world. So there has to be a reason for it. Earlier, you used the word mythological, and to me that implies not real. But somewhere at the beginning or the middle or the end of all these things that are cooked up around the world that we believe could be flying and could be killing, there's a germ of truth somewhere. That'd be.
Well, absolutely. And, you hit the nail on the head there. It's really about perspective, isn't it? Because many of the remarkable animal discoveries of the past century started out as quote unquote myths. The mountain gorilla, the giant squid, the Komodo dragon, the giant panda. I mean, all of these animals were considered mythological, except to the people, of course, that lived in those particular areas and were familiar with the animals. But to Western science, they were considered mythological. So cryptozoology is all about kind of bringing the shroud, the veil of mythology down and revealing that greater truth behind each myth.
Okay, let's start with the big 100-pound gorilla, so to speak, in the U.S. And that's Bigfoot. I mean, I can do show after show after show on Bigfoot. I talked to a lady in Texas who literally lives adjacent to and with a Bigfoot. That's big stuff here, and people absolutely believe it. I see why. How does that fit into the because he doesn't fly, but otherwise, very cryptid-like, right?
Well, Bigfoot really represents cryptozoology, as does as do his cousins around the world, the Yeti or abominable snowman of the Himalayas, the Yeren of China, the Yali of Australia. Essentially, man-like forms, hominids, and evidently of a subhuman, sort of an ancient subhuman type. So, from a zoological standpoint, it makes perfect sense. Listen, for thousands of years, there were several different forms, subspecies of humans that were living alongside each other. So why would the present be any different?
You say some human. We're not really sure of that, are we? In other words, if Bigfoot is a real McCoy, we kind of, I've had people on that have played Bigfoot talking to each other, and it sounded very intelligent. It sounded like a real language, and we say subhuman, but we don't really know enough to say subhuman. Maybe they're smarter than we are. Maybe dolphins are.
Well, that's a fair point. I can't say. So perhaps, yeah, that wasn't the right vernacular. But my point being that there were things that look very similar to Bigfoot in our fossil history. We know that lived for sure hundreds of thousands of years ago during the mid-Pleistocene epoch. So why could those beings not be around today?
Well, they actually could. The question is, and the big one always is, how do they stay? Actually, they've got to be pretty bright if they can generally be unseen.
Mm-hmm.
I would say.
And that speaks to your point. That speaks to your point. They are, presumably, they are highly intelligent. They're not merely apes. All of the major great apes have been discovered as of 1902. So these are hominids, probably, our closest, obviously our closest relatives on the planet. They're having indications of potential language, a basal language. They're having indications of sort of a rudimentary tool use in terms of, stones and rocks. No indications they use fire. But it's my personal belief that a lot of these could be adaptations that are basically that these beings have evolved to avoid contact with humans. That they deem us as their primary competition, and thus they've chosen to live in the most remote areas. They've chosen to live kind of a nocturnal lifestyle. They seem to move around a lot at night, and they are very skillful and adept at avoiding contact with us.
Do you think there is any question at all about Bigfoot being a reality?
I'm convinced that Bigfoot is a reality. The $1 million question is, what is it? But there's a mountain of evidence, sir. Mountain of evidence, and most people that are sort of mildly interested probably aren't acquainted with all of the evidence. But if you immerse yourself in the subject matter, you combine thousands of documented eyewitnesses over the years, all of the legends, the global legends around the world that correspond, very consistent, and then you factor in the footprints that have been cast, and the Patterson film.
By the way, how do you come down here, Sam? How do you come down on the Patterson film?
The first time I saw the Patterson film art, on an instinctive level, I thought that's got to be real. I mean, the movements are so fluid and natural. I've watched it, obviously, countless times throughout the course of my life, and it always comes back to the fact that we're talking about an era, 1967, when costume technology was not that advanced. And if you compare the movement and the size and the bulk of the figure of the Patterson film, the fluidity of this creature, you can actually see its muscles moving and flexing. The hair flow patterns are very natural. All of it works in concert together. And, and then if you go and look at any movie from that time period, like the Planet of the Apes movies, and you realize how, primitive costume technology was in those days. I'm convinced the Patterson film is real. I guess it'll always be kind of inconclusive. No one's going to be able to prove it either way. They've never produced a suit. But then again, the creature got away. It didn't leave footprints, and so that kind of added to the evidence as well.
Yeah, and you know what really bothers me? If we were to get the equivalent of the Patterson film today, and we got it digitally, nobody would believe it. And I say that because we live in a time of CGI that is so good that it can be made to be better than the real thing because they get all the exact angles they want. I saw the recent earthquake film. You see that? San Andreas? No. That was the king of CGI. They destroyed California. And it was so real that, you were sitting on the edge of your seat. I mean, that's how good CGI is. So if we got a modern equivalent to the Patterson film, I think that people would shoot holes in it because it's just so easy now to take it. Not then, but now.
Yeah, absolutely. And for that reason, I disregard a lot of the photographic evidence. I should say I debunk a lot of the photographic evidence that I'm giving these days, because a lot of it is been manufactured. You know, it is very easy for someone with the skill and the software to devise something like that. But in 1967, that wasn't the case. And, you know, Patterson, people that knew Roger Patterson thought he was you know, he was a bit of a character, but he was a very simple man. And, you know, I honestly don't think that he had the resources and the mind to conceive of a hoax that brilliant. And, you know, furthermore, there have been physical anthropologists that have studied that film, and much smarter than I am, and experts in biomechanics who studied it, and have determined that the figure in the film is moving in a very non-human fashion. Its mode of locomotion right inside people is very different from the humans. And it actually corresponds exactly with what you would have to have to propel a bipedal hominid that weighs several hundred pounds through those forests.
Okay. All right. Well, we're coming up on a break, Ken, but I want you to think about something during the break. And I ask this of everybody who talks about Bigfoot and these kinds of creatures, frankly, in general. And that is, if you were, I don't know, out in the forest somewhere, and you saw a Bigfoot, there it is. You've got a high-powered rifle. You can actually settle for once and forever the fact that, you know, Bigfoot is real. You can be the king of cryptozoology forever. All you've got to do is squeeze that trigger and take it down, and the whole thing gets settled. Would you pull that trigger or walk away? This is Midnight Myth.
Last week, this guy never sold this package off my porch. Because this mobile camera doesn't just record signs, it prevents it. If your doorbell does...
That's so frequently in the air right now. This is where we get back to it. So I'm going to read something. So, hey, I won't give Dave's last name. Dave said it's quite stupid. Playing treaty obligations. But you think about it, like Turkey is the aggressor. You'll soon see NATO dissolve over this. Guaranteed, Art. Dave, you don't understand, buddy. NATO is a locked-in group, and NATO is not going to dissolve. And if a NATO country is attacked, Dave, we're at war. You need to understand that. We're at war. And you need to understand what that means. I really think an awful lot of today's generation doesn't have a clue. They don't have a clue about our treaty obligations, the ones that we're really stuck with, and the ones that I guess we could let slide. It could happen. All right, Ken, welcome back again. And so I gave you the big question. There it is. You're out in the middle of the woods. You've got them in your sights. You've got a high-powered rifle. You can settle this question for all of humanity. You drop the Bigfoot. You bring him in, have him examined. You are the king, as well as the villain, of all of cryptozoology. Yeah, what would you do?
Well, that is definitely a hot button topic in the field of Bigfoot, kill or no kill, and the debate's been going on for years. You know, Honestly, Art,
Honestly.
I think several years ago when I was kind of getting started in the field, I would have absolutely pulled the trigger. And not for selfish reasons, not for money, not for fame, but because I really felt that the only way to protect Bigfoot was to prove conclusively 100% that it existed. And it has been estimated that there are probably at least several hundred, if not a couple of thousand individuals in North America alone. You would have to have that in order to maintain a viable breeding population. So if you shoot one, you're not necessarily shooting the last one. But, where I'm sitting now, I think through the years that I've begun to use these, as truly sentient. And I know that I've read many accounts of people that have actually had them in their sites, hunters and so forth, that have actually not been able to pull the trigger because they said that the things just looked so darn human. Right. And could you live with yourself? If you shot this thing, you realize that essentially that is a human on the form. So I would say right now in this place and time, I probably couldn't do it. I'm hopeful that someone will eventually find remains. I mean, if these things are out there, they're dying of natural causes.
Well, okay, that's a really good place to stop you and ask the big question, and that is, sure, if they are real in the same sense that we are, then there should be remains, and we haven't found those. So you've got to at least entertain the possibility that there's sort of paranormal in some way or another, and I'm sure you get that a lot. What do you think?
Yes, I do actually have been asked that question a lot, particularly in recent years. I get the sense that we're kind of moving through sort of a rebirth of the spiritualist movement where people are very much embracing the paranormal and the sort of cosmic, otherworldly aspects to our dimension and so forth. So, that is probably a strong argument why we haven't found the body, that they're simply stepping out into another dimension or through a doorway or a portal. There does seem to be a segment of Bigfoot sightings that have kind of really strange aspects where they've been shot at point blank range and they're impervious to bullets, or where they're seen running and their tracks just disappear in the middle of nowhere. But coming from a traditional cryptozoology background, I still like to kind of hedge my bets and think that these are essentially pre-human forms, hominids from an earlier age that are essentially still around, and they're highly intelligent. And I used to say that these things aren't capable of burying their own dead. Maybe that's one of the reasons we haven't found the remains. They've obviously evolved and adapted behavior patterns to avoid being found by humans because they probably think that, once they are found out, that will essentially be the end of them.
Ken, have you actually interviewed somebody who was had a clear shot and taken it at what he thought was Bigfoot?
Yeah, I actually, I knew a gentleman or a group of gentlemen that were actively investigating and researching Bigfoot years ago. And according to them, they actually did take a shot and end up wounding one of the creatures. And it's kind of a grisly story. The thing got away, thank goodness. I think maybe that was kind of a bit of an awakening for some of those gentlemen because they sensed after the fact that they realized what they had done. But perhaps they got caught up in the heat of the moment. There have been accounts, this is interesting, we were talking about Asia earlier. There actually have been a handful of accounts from Asia of Bigfoot type creatures being either captured or killed. Oftentimes in a war scenario, I'm sure you've heard of the stories too, the rock apes of Vietnam and so forth. So there could potentially be remains out there somewhere in another part of the world. And boy, I sure wish we could get our hands on that evidence.
Well, so do I. Let's move on because really we were here to talk about flying cryptids and we've not yet touched on that. And I guess the place to begin would be Mothman, possibly?
Wow. Well, Mothman is obviously one of the most enigmatic figures in the annals of the unexplained. I mean, the physical description is pretty wild. A gray man-like creature, standing over 6 feet tall with immense wings attached to its body. A Mothman is really the quintessential monster. I mean, it's almost like something that's stepped right out of a science fiction movie. Most eyewitnesses have described it as possessing a low-slung head with two enormous eyes. And that's the most startling feature of the Mothman, these giant blood red embers that like automobile reflectors that seemingly have a hypnotic effect over humans.
I really can't. I'm sorry, I don't like red eyes and even a little.
Wow, so this is kind of hitting a nerve, huh? These giant red eyes, you envisioning that?
Yeah, I don't like that. I really, there are a few things in life that scare me. Red eyes, definitely one of them. When I was a kid, I always envisioned red eyes in my closet, and I kept the door shut. I was door shut all the time for that reason. Anyway, so Mothman is said to have red eyes, glowing red eyes.
Red eyes, and some people have claimed that, when they were looking at these eyes, that they basically lost, all control, fell into a hypnotic trance-like state. But the really frightening thing is that Mothman's behavior, there have been many accounts of Mothman chasing cars at speeds approaching 100 miles an hour. His sole purpose seems to be to absolutely terrify human beings. And obviously, the story is that there were literally dozens, or according to researcher John Keel, hundreds of sightings of the Mothman beginning in November of 1966 with the Strawberry Mallet sighting. And then over the course of that next year, there were literally dozens or hundreds of sightings of this Mothman creature in and around the sleepy little town of West Virginia.
If you have any specific stories you can tell about the appearance of that, I'd love to hear.
Well, the seminal sighting involved two young couples, Roger and Linda Scarborough and Stephen Larry Mallet. They were cruising around outside Point Pleasant in the area known as the TNT area. And the reason it's called that area is back in World War II, there was actually a factory there that was manufacturing TNT for the war effort and other chemicals. It's a pretty wild place. It's actually, to this day, there's about 60 to 100 concrete igloo-like structures where they store the explosives and these hazardous chemicals. But by the 1960s, this was a hangout for the local teenagers. So they were basically just cruising through this area one night, November 15, 1966. And suddenly there's an old abandoned building known as the power plant. They saw this figure. And the description was, 6.5, 7 feet tall, giant bat-like wings coming out of the shoulders and the giant red eyes. And of course, they saw this thing. They were utterly terrified. They took off back to this town. And to their horror and chagrin, the Mothman actually took off straight off the ground, and that's significant, like a helicopter, and chased them all the way back to the town of Point Pleasant. They disappeared into town, and they were so terrified that they went to the local sheriff's office and burst in and then filed a report. And the sheriff who was on duty, Deputy Dennis Hereford, he actually knew the couple, the two young couples. Point Pleasant's a very small town, of course, everyone knows everyone. And he knew them to be, very upstanding and honest citizens, and thought that they were basically scared with us. So they returned to the scene. They didn't see the Mothman, but they heard some strange noises. And, that was it. That kind of started the whole movement. The next night, there were hundreds of people out at the TNT area looking for Mothman, and another woman named Marcella Bennett, who was visiting some friends nearby the TNT area, claimed that the Mothman actually rose up behind her car when she got out of the car, causing her to collapse in a trance-like state and fall on top of her infant child. So those are kind of the two seminal sightings of the Mothman that started the entire affair.
With the description, do we see, let's see, is this Mothman? We've got a couple of drawings I know on the site. And down there, if you go to artbell.com and click on my guest information, we've got a couple of things here. And I'm trying to figure out how such a creature, most everything we know that has wings takes gathering a little forward speed to get off the ground. They can't go straight up, or can they?
No, you're absolutely right. You have certain laws of physics and inertia and momentum and so forth that all flying creatures born on this earth typically have some type of forward thrust or movement. And so again, many of the descriptions of Mothman was a very unnatural movement. This thing took off straight off the ground without flapping its wings. Essentially didn't flap its wings when it flight. It was more of a glider and moved at just impossible speeds, 100 miles an hour. So it definitely did not behave like anything that has evolved on this planet. Anything we can find in our fossil history.
Even Superman had to take quite a few steps and then a bound, I believe, to get going. But straight up, that's bothersome. And again, it seems to, lead toward the paranormal more than not. That's, if I pause like that again, that's a chance for you to jump in.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as a cryptozoologist, I tend to look for the more pragmatic explanations. And for example, there's kind of an absurd theory out there that some cryptozoologists have put forward that what Mothman was, in fact, was some type of large owl that people mistook for something else and it created mass hysteria. And certainly I don't believe that, based on all of the research that I've done. The only conclusion I can draw is that Mothman is some type of spectral entity or apparition. Whether you want to say or speculate that it is an extraterrestrial, whether it's an interdimensional being, a demonic, there are many different ways that people look at this phenomenon. But essentially, it is not of this earth. It's not a flesh and blood creature in the way that we know it. But at least that's my opinion.
And then I guess that brings us to something known as the Owl Man. What is that?
Yes, Owl Man is England's version of, essentially England's version of the Mothman. It's a very similar creature in terms of it's often seen in the same location. It has I hate to say that, it's got the large glowing red eyes once again. But the descriptions are somewhat different. Owl Man, which has been cited primarily in grounds and woods surrounding an old church in Cornwall, England, known as Moran Church. It's right there on the coast. And interestingly, the church is said to be built on an ancient earthwork. But Owl Man is described as essentially man-sized and winged, but with grizzled gray fur feathers, pointy ears, a smearing gaping black mouth, and feet like pincers with crab claws. And what's interesting is that all of the encounters have been in woods around this old church. Virtually all of the witnesses, and the sightings began in 1976, in the spring, summer of 1976, so all of the witnesses have been essentially teenage girls and one adolescent male. Now, my colleague John Bennett has written a similar book on that. And what's interesting is that he believes that he's experienced a great deal of what we call psychic backlash while investing in this particular case. All kinds of unfortunate things that happened to him. And, very reminiscent of the Mothman, where you have allegations of this curse, this death curse, that people that are involved in the Mothman have been harassed by the Men in Black or have met kind of mysterious untimely ends.
Okay, so the implication of that would be that our own government, at some level, knows something about these things. And I can imagine they wouldn't. I mean, if there are reliable reports of creatures that are able to fly, whether it's the American or British government, you would definitely think there would be an interest in finding out what they are. I mean, who knows? They could be weapons, right? Turning into weapons on the battlefield. So the U.S. government, British government, I would think would have interest in them, hence the Men in Black.
Yes, and John Keel, of course, who wrote the famous Mothman Prophecies book, and kind of was there in the moment during the 1966-67 draft. He certainly believed that there was government involvement, that his phones were being tapped, that he was being followed and harassed. He spoke to many of the Mothman eyewitnesses that he claimed that they were harassed and threatened into silence. So there are that elements of the case as well. Now, don't you think it's interesting that the Mothman, most of the sites of the Mothman in the T area, were a place that represented the manufacture of explosives and hazardous chemicals and other things that were going to be used in the war efforts as well. That's kind of a bizarre tie-in right there, I think.
Sure, I don't understand the tie-in necessarily, but yes, it's interesting. Of course, it's interesting. Do you have any speculation about why?
Well, as I've researched all of these flying humanoid beings throughout history, I've found that there is a underlying belief that these beings, whatever they are essentially harbingers or portents of tragic cataclysmic events. In the case of Mothman, you have the tragic collapse of the Silver Bridge, which occurred in December of 1967, right around the time Mothman was being seen. And sure enough, the sightings of Mothman, dramatically reduced after that. You have in antiquity, you have Pazuzu. Pazuzu was an Assyrian winged humanoid type of figure that was often associated with famine and drought and all of these horrible events. And then, going across the world to Scotland, you have something known as the Spree. The Spree is a flying humanoid type of creature, kind of a hideous witch, or the last one, I guess, in some ways, that is said to overfly battlefields before many people. One misconception of meditation is that if you're meditating, your mind will be blank. You can't make your mind blank. And if you try, you're just going to wind up with a gigantic headache. In a way, when we're on autopilot, we're sort of talking to our minds. Mindfulness is traditionally a form of meditation. It's the awareness that arises from paying attention on purpose in the present moment and on judgment. If you're breathing, you would be killed and things like that. So like underlying things is finding that whatever they are essentially findings.
Hold it right there, Ken. We'll be right back. I'm Martha. Exclusively on the Dark Matter Digital Network with our film invite you to call now 1-952. All artifacts from 952-225-5278. Ken Gerard is here, and he's a cryptozoologist, mostly talking about the cryptids that fly. That's a little misleading to say flying humans, but they are, in fact, hardly human, actually. All right, so Ken, you're back again. You said something that really caught my attention. You said they're frequently regarded as harbingers of something awful happening or that's happening, whatever, right?
Yes, I found that in antiquity and different legends around the world. Creatures that are depicted as being similar to the Mothman, and there are many examples, were greatly feared by those different local peoples because they represented a tragic event to come.
All right. Well, Keith, if you're listening, I'm so sorry to ask this again, but there was a ton of photography done around the tragedy that was 9/11. And I don't know if you've ever seen this photograph, but if you haven't, I'm going to fix it so you can see it. It was a photograph taken during the 9/11 tragedy, and it showed, God, I'm telling you, Ken, I can't get over it. I'll never get over it. It shows, and then a building as a reference was this giant prehistoric something or another, Ken, that was flying in the skies in New York while this was going on, and somebody caught it in a photograph. And if I can, somebody will send he or he has it, put it up, whatever. If we can get it up there, I'll get it up there and you can take a look. You're not by any chance familiar with what I'm talking about, are you?
I think I've seen that photograph. Yeah, I'll have to see it again. Make a little jog my memory.
Well, so what is that thing? It looks prehistoric.
Well, I've certainly heard allegations, unsubstantiated allegations, that Mothman or a Mothman type figure was seen before 9/11. The photograph, we'll have to take a look at that. Is that up yet?
Not yet. He moves quickly, not that quickly, so I'll keep an eye out for it.
Okay, let's take a look. That's interesting. I'd like to see that for sure.
Well, when you said Harbinger, I get exist. I've wondered for a long time what that is. All right, so I know you've got specific stories you can tell us about things that have affected people that you really think, are real, really happened. Things that really happened. Any cases, we've got the time. So if you've got some good cases, lay them on us.
Well, there's some classic cases out there that are pretty creepy and honestly very frightening. For example, in 1956, at a place called Falls City, Nebraska, a gentleman, a farmer who used a pseudonym, John Hanks, and he actually reported the event. Obviously didn't want to be exposed, but according to this gentleman, this farmer, he encountered a being while working out in his field one day, and this thing basically overflew him at a height of about 15 feet. And the description is pretty chilling. He said that this figure had a human-like form, would have been about 90 feet tall. The wings were not actually, organic wings. They were mechanical, sort of silver mechanical wings with a low light showing down, about 15 feet across. And this being, whatever it was operating these wings and flying with a control panel strapped to his chest. But the really chilling part was the description of the face. The face, he described the face as looking demonic, with these blue, watery eyes and little sort of leathery skin and a scowling frown on his face. And as he watched this thing, it just sort of hovered over him on this thing and kind of took off. Another one that I'm quite fond of, for some of the reasons, is refers to the extraordinary third woman at the man in Vietnam. And apparently, according to a Marine by the name of Earl Morrison, he related this story to a reference to Don Irving. During the Vietnam War, he was stationed on with two other families, and on top of, sort of a watchtower type situation. And we saw a figure approaching the distance, and at first we thought it was a very large bat, but they realized quickly that this figure is much larger than any bat they had ever seen before. And as this figure got closer and closer, they were able to make out that it was actually the form of a new living lion, completely black in color, seemed to be covered in kind of a black fur or hair-like substance, and bat-like wings, and that she hovered like right over their head, peering down at them kind of ominously, and she seemed to be giving off kind of a green cast or a green glow. So it was kind of a very unnerving experience that this gentleman, had. And what's really interesting again there is that, we're talking about a battle, scenario. So, these fallen humanoids are often reported around military installations or over battlefields, things of that nature. But, certainly not all the accounts are very old. I have a lot of modern accounts that I chronicle in my book, Encounters with Flying Humanoids. And in fact, I continue to receive accounts of these flying humanoid type creatures. One of the most recent was a gentleman that lives out in West Texas. He got in touch with me. I interviewed this gentleman over the phone many times, and he comes off as extremely super incredible. And what he tells me is that he was out on that little drive and looking at the stars and the approaching stellar system. And similar to the third one of the man, they saw this figure approaching them. And when it got right over their heads, he said it was essentially a man-like creature with long flowing hair and giant black angelic wings. And he said this thing would have stood about 10 or 14 feet tall, and very high cheekbones, and it had a tooth or two very special features. And, again, it was sort of right over their heads. So, those are just some examples, but, there are many, many more.
Well, again, I'm going to say this. It may not seem like it, but if you could somehow control these creatures during battle, And you can make these things appear to your enemy. You know, listen, most of us, frankly, if I was listening with glowing red eyes, hovering in front of me, I'd probably toss down whatever I had and go in the other direction. And so they would be a big asset to anybody who could control them on a battlefield. No question about it, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And there's also been speculation that these things are extraterrestrial in nature. Could these be the familiars or the instruments of some higher intelligence, those essentially?
Well, are there appearances associated with UFO sightings, that sort of thing?
Absolutely are. At the time period when the Mothman was being sighted in and around West Virginia, there were UFO sightings, strange lights in the sky that were being reported to the local law enforcement agencies almost on a nightly basis. In fact, if you go back and look at the newspaper archives at that time, you've got literally as many reports of strange flying lights and UFO type objects as the Mothman itself, and around that same time period in that same area. Additionally, many of the flying humanoids that I've investigated in Mexico, and for some strange reason, Mexico seems to be ground zero for the flying humanoid phenomenon. There were a lot of reports coming out of Mexico. And a lot of those have been logged by UFO investigators that are essentially, videotaping these strange flying humanoid creatures in conjunction or in areas where they've also videotaped, flying objects.
All right, since we're on that subject, are there any good videos, or even better videos of what we're talking about right now? Something that it would be a flying cricket. Has anybody caught it on camera or on video?
In terms of the flying humanoids, there are several videos that can be found online, and these were made by Mexican UFO researchers. And these are referred to as unidentified flying humanoids, UFHs. Now, the videotape quality is not that great. Essentially, what you're going to see in these videotapes, you're going to see a man-like figure, and you can definitely make out two legs hanging down, two arms hanging down. But these are very different from the Mothman. They don't have any wings or any visible means of propulsion. But these figures, whatever they are essentially hovering around or flying around high up in the atmosphere. And they have been videotaped in many locations around Mexico going back to the year 2000. And again, in areas where UFOs have been reported as well. And so I do cover these in the book because they do seem to be related in many ways to the Mothman figure. Although they do not have wings or any visible way to fly, they're just really up there very high in the air flying around.
Okay, since you're in San Antonio, please comment for me on the chupacabra, because when I was on there, a decade or two ago, the chupacabra thing was actually going on at the time. I saw some pretty awful pictures of the chupacabra did, and pictures that were represented to be a chupacabra. What do you know about that thing?
Well, that's one of the questions I get asked the most because there seem to be many different things going on here. The chupacabra is a case of composite identity, where one particular word or name is being used as kind of a blanket to explain a lot of different weird things. But obviously, the original chupacabra originated in Puerto Rico during the 1990s, and there were a series of very grotesque livestock killings. And the name chupacabra, literal translation is goat sucker. Right. So it's a vampire-like creature, and of course the initial descriptions that came out of Puerto Rico and other Latin American countries describe this kind of a gargoyle type creature, bipedal with reptilian quality and giant eyes, right? Right. But here in Texas, over the past decade or so, there have been other animals that have been turning out that have been referred to as chupacabras. They always make it into the newspaper on the local news channel. Now, I've examined about a half dozen of these animals myself, the remains of these animals, and they are essentially they are grotesque looking canids and dog-like animals. They are completely hairless. They have kind of a rough hide type covering, almost like an elephant. In many cases, they have abnormally large teeth, canine teeth or fangs, long claws, and so forth. And they're very grotesque and ugly looking. And there have been allegations by some of the local ranchers and livestock owners that these dog-like animals are drinking the blood of their livestock. That has not been substantiated scientifically. But because there's a very strong Mexican-American influence here in Texas and other parts of the southern United States, you have that cultural influence, essentially, that crossover aspect, where you have these strange-looking animals, predators that are showing up, and people are referring to them as chupacabras, when they are, in fact, completely different from the creature, whatever it is, that was reported from Puerto Rico beginning in the 1990s.
Okay. And now, whether it's a chupacabra or something with blooming red eyes, no thank you. Are there any reports? I have this feeling that if these things are perhaps demonic in nature, it seems like demonic things, ghosts, whatever, cannot actually physically harm people. They can attempt to drive people into doing bad things, but they can't seem to actually manipulate in our physical universe. And I wonder if that is true of these flying cryptids as well. In other words, are there reports of people getting torn to bits by these things, or generally do we not get reports of physical attacks?
Well, another great question. Actually, and I address this in my book as well. There are no documented accounts of anyone actually being physically attacked by a flying humanoid or Mothman type creature, although there are many accounts of Mothman, Iron Man, and other flying humanoid creatures chasing and terrorizing humans. So they do, in fact, seem to, for whatever reason, they want to terrify us, they want to frighten us. I guess if you want to characterize that as demonic, then that's fair. This reminds me of an interesting sighting, a case that occurred very recently in 2006, and this refers to the man bat of Bridge Road, Wisconsin. I believe I'll photo this up on your website.
I want to know which one it is. The man bat, is that the first one or the second?
Oh, the first one. The first one.
I believe it's, yeah. All right. Right.
Yes. And that illustration, incidentally, is by Linda Godfrey, who I believe you had as a guest on your show. Correct. But that's her interpretation. But according to Linda, who was the initial investigator, these two gentlemen of Native American descent were driving home one evening in a place in Wisconsin, which is very close to La Crosse. And suddenly this creature that you see there dived out of the treetops and basically dive bombed the pickup truck they were driving in. And they described it as having a human-like form with bat-like wings, a hideous face with long fangs, and kind of a pronounced rib cage and long claws. Well, this thing dive bombed their pickup truck and took off, and shortly thereafter they could hear this ringing noise, a very high-pitched ringing noise that actually forced them to pull to the side of the road where they both became violently ill. And shortly thereafter, they got home and began to experience all kinds of strange things. Their dog, which was normally very affable and friendly, was hiding and cowering under the bed. They were hearing strange noises, banging noises around the outside of their house as if something, some type of unseen force was banging on their walls and harassing them. So this is, just an example of kind of the attachment aspect of these other flying humanoid phenomena. Not only are these flying humanoid creatures seemingly interested in terrifying and chasing and scaring the bejesus out of people, but oftentimes there is a residual attachment effect where people will actually experience all kinds of bad feelings and illness and kind of heebie-jeebies after the event takes place.
Okay. In addition, you said that people who experience these things are frequently then either questioned or harassed by men in black.
Well, this is something that has been documented by, or was primarily documented by, again, John Keel, author of Mothman Prophecies. Now, no one was in the thick of it like Kia. He was actually there on the ground shortly after Mothman was first reported in Point Pleasant. He reviewed many of the eyewitnesses, and according to Keel, many of the eyewitnesses claimed that they were in fact visited by strange men in black-like figures. In fact, a woman named Mary Heyer, who was a local newspaper reporter in Point Pleasant, claimed that a strange figure visited her at her office one time. And she said that he spoke in a strange, haughty voice, almost as if English was a foreign language. And that he had a fascination, a strange fascination for sort of the mundane objects that were laid across her desk. But the message was, in fact, very real that he did not want her to be reporting his Mothman accounts in the local newspaper, and actually became kind of threatening in terms of his tone and demeanor and so forth.
Very MIT-like. Yeah, that's really curious. Very, very curious. And I only, just trying to imagine, well, why would our government or their agents be interested in this sort of thing? Again, I go back to the possibility of their use in terrorizing an enemy. That's all I can think of. Or if you want to get even a little further down the road of strange conjecture, it could be that in some government lab somewhere, they created these damn things.
Well, those are certainly two of the theories that have been suggested, that Mothman is some type of diabolical military experiment. That perhaps Mothman rose up out of the sort of the cosmic chemicals and some of those other, kind of like a mutation that kind of rose up there in Point Pleasant, but perhaps it was some type of intelligent design.
I also had a lady who called, I think we were in an open line segment, or maybe it was, we were doing something on Bigfoot, and she said that something like a Bigfoot actually ran into her car. In other words, she was going down the highway, and this thing came from the side and happened to hit the side toward the rear of her car, and there was a fair amount of damage. Whatever it is got away, but it actually just apparently wanted to run into her car. That's pretty weird, huh?
Well, that is pretty weird. I don't think I've heard of an account quite like that. I've heard of many people who claim that Bigfoot type creatures had chased their vehicles, some of them Mothman, or jumped out of them, sort of as they were changing a flat tire on the side of the road on a dark and lonely road, that type of thing.
Isn't that always the way? You're on a dark, lonely road. Your car's not running, and you've got a flying cryptid. That's scary. So why so much in Mexico? Yeah.
Well, I think a couple of reasons possibly. Mexico, of course, has for those of you listeners that are familiar, and I'm sure many of them are familiar with sort of the ancient alien aspect or tie-ins in Mexico, you have all of these great civilizations that sprung up there, the Olmecs, the Aztec, and the Aztec and the Maya, and civilizations that obviously had a very perplexing level of technology and mathematics and knowledge of astronomy and things like that. So, the inference, of course, is that there have been perhaps, extraterrestrial landing spots, I guess you would say, in Mexico. Now, when I was investigating a flying humanoid type creature just outside of Monterrey, Mexico, back in 2009, I was taken to a mysterious place known as La Huasteca, which is in the Sierra Madre Mountains just outside of Monterrey. And there in a kind of a sacred spot are these ancient pictographs on the side of this rock wall that are thousands of years old. Nobody really knows how old they are. And they seem to depict strange circular objects flying around in the sky. So, that's just another example of why, Mexico seems to have been a UFO hotspot for probably thousands of years. And of course, in recent years, we have been many sightings of UFOs down there as well. But there are many accounts of these kind of creatures in and around Monterey, in and around Mexico City. So Mexico, just for whatever reason, seems to be ground zero. I wish I could explain it better than that, Art, but it's a pretty fascinating place.
Well, whether it's Bigfoot or these flying crypto, or it's UFOs in Mexico, I wish we could pin all this down and come to some kind of conclusion about it, but it seems just out of reach, just out of being